There we go, Shannon. Let's do this
Hi,
thing.
welcome.
Ding,
Let's
ding.
do this thing. It's Brian and I on video this time. Red Frog, Stop, Listen, Shoot. We left off, okay, you were across the pond. We're going to continue kind of the conversation around medical a little bit. I'll let you introduce yourself really quick, and then I'll go into where we left off.
Yes, I'm Brian Comte. I'm a retired Master Sergeant for the United States Army. The units that I spent the most time with was 2nd and 3rd Ranger Battalion, where I was an infantryman, and then 5th Special Forces Group, where I was a Special Forces Medical Sergeant. And my last 3 years, I taught at the JSOM TC, which is where the all medics that are soft qualified go through every 2 years to get their credentials updated. And so I got a lot of experience teaching T-Tri-C and advanced trauma management. So yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah, and where we left off, if everyone watched the podcast prior to this with Brian, it was a little blurry. He was across the pond, if you will, and
Yes.
a lot has happened since then. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll jump into why this is so appropriate, our conversation today. Today we're talking about EMDR, and we're talking about transitioning from the military life to civilian life, or that purgatory in between. And
Yeah.
so let's talk about kind of what transpired. I'm usually keep this content evergreen, but it's so interesting what just happened since we last.
Yeah. So I did 3 months. I spent 3 months, in Kabul at the airfield working, and then I came home for a couple months, did some paid time off, and did some training to get all my credentials up to date. And then I flew back over to Kabul. And it was the strangest week in my entire life. So I think I flew over about the 8th of August, maybe. And they said, don't unpack. You're going over to the embassy. So I go over to the embassy, I unpack, and then all of a sudden the word's going out. The place is like a ghost town. That like, yeah, this is coming apart really quick. Don't unpack. So I stuff all my stuff back in the bag, and
Are you allowed to talk about this actually?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about it, but it was a strange, we'll call it a very strange experience. So we literally got like, hey, we're leaving.
Do you are, in case I have to cut this out, are you allowed to talk about that, Kabul? What do you think?
I don't know. I know somebody's got to talk about it.
Do you have clearance? I mean, will it hurt your clearance or anything?
I don't think so. I don't think.
Okay, just check.
Yeah, the specifics of it all aren't there.
Okay, so basically, you came back over here, and we were setting up training classes for fall, and you came back a lot sooner than we thought, which is interesting because you were like, oh, again, across the pond. I don't know if we'll go into all that detail, but you sent me a picture from the airplane. How many? I do want to talk about the airplane. What flight were you out on?
That was just the C-17. Yeah. And the last thing the flight crew said to us was crisscross applesauce, pass the cargo strap across. Everybody looked at each other and knew exactly what crisscross applesauce meant. So we're cross-legged on the floor, like sardines, and passing the cargo strap. That's what they had for exfilling that many people.
Fascinating. Fascinating. And what's so interesting about that, and I haven't been doing many podcasts with video lately, and so I'm going to start doing them because I think a lot of people are asking about Red Frog and why it started. And my background is I was born in Fort Knox, Kentucky. I'm a military Army brat. My dad was in it, 2 tours of Vietnam, came out of it. I lived in the family that lived through that transition from military life to civilian life. And one thing that struck me is the interesting transition time and the psychology behind coming out of that world and finding, a new world for yourself, in the civilian life, or whether it be business or civilian. And there's through that transition, or anyone's transition from an intense situation to a new situation, there's you have to acknowledge maybe the trauma or the life that you're in, and kind of go through a phase of transition. But so today we're talking about transitioning from military to civilian life. Brian is awesome. He's able to kind of go back and forth post-military. Now you're doing the contracting work a little bit, but also you're perfect with Red Frog because you transition quite nicely into the civilian world.
Okay, so Shannon thinks that I went through this thing nicely and I came out smelling like a rose. Let me tell you something. Those first 3 years out of the military, I'm a complete train wreck. Complete train wreck. It was like a slow motion train wreck. You couldn't take your eyes off. It was so horrible, but you had to watch. And that was my life. I mean, it was just really, really messy. And somewhere along the way, I ended up in Northern California in a community that really had a lot of good practitioners and good recovery, we'll say. 10% of the voting population up here is veterans, so we have a lot of Vietnam vets up here who's already gone through this thing or are still going through it. And I got up here. I found something along the way that was, it says there's a direct linkage between prayer, meditation, and self-examination. When you take them separately, they can provide much relief. But when you logically interwove them and relate them, they can produce an unshakable foundation for life. I was pretty sick. I was really sick, in fact, because, this combat thing, is it a thinking man's game or is it a muscle man's game? Anybody that's really done it and played in that arena would pause for a second, and then they would say, ultimately, it's a thinking man's game. So as we're doing push-ups and running and doing sit-ups or whatever we're doing for physical training, what are we doing for in this whole process? And so that was my experience. I wasn't doing this work, since we decided that this is a thinking man's game. What are we doing for our most valued asset on the battlefield?
Right.
That would be, and then you would get a bunch of, Rangers and Green Berets and, on, and they would just, their jaw would drop and they would drool because they've never really thought about that part of it. Like, what are we doing for this?
Right.
And so I learned it backwards.
All of us, and all of us experience trauma, and it's how we deal with it. And one thing I was passionate about was seeing how my dad, coming out of that world, felt had a lot of comfort in camaraderie. So when you surround yourself with other people post-military, he would go visit friends in Montana or Florida or so forth. And I saw that space of camaraderie gives you an opportunity to have shared experience and kind of, unpack or, and kind of dissect what maybe had been your trauma, whether it be childhood trauma, whether it be combat trauma, you can apply it to anyone's trauma. But
absolutely,
I feel like in the space of Red Frog, we've had a lot of that kind of trauma experience, and it's been a nice place to bring people together to talk about it. So coming into this conversation, I think specifically, we're going to talk a little bit more about different tools and people's tool belt to deal with unpacking that trauma. Unpacking things. Is that a nice way of saying it? Again, we all have different.
Yeah, you got to do something with it. Otherwise, it weighs you down. It gets heavy. Put down the rucksack.
Yeah, and I think what what for you has that rucksack looked like, in not in yourself, but in others that you've experienced? Because you're in that world of the, the alpha male, all that. I have my I have my experiences that I'm still dealing with. But what have you experienced are cues that someone's still unpacking their trauma?
It comes in all kinds of flavors, man. We had all kinds of stuff happen. I was on that really weird place where, this SEAL commander commits suicide in Afghanistan. We had one of my best friends, he's a L-18 Delta Green Beret. Man, psych ward, psych ward, psych ward. And they kept thinking it was alcoholism. Man, it wasn't alcoholism. He had a mean case of PTSD and a couple of head injuries. And the next thing you know, he's a dad in the Warrior Transition Battalion because he mixed some fentanyl with some alcohol. And it was happening literally all around me, like people that were in my classes, we were all over the wall, one of my students on the wall, And so this is all happening in and around you, and you're suffering because you're treating yourself and your lack of sleep with alcohol or whatever, mostly alcohol, and a bunch of bad behavior. So that's how it was going. For me, it looked like severe anxiety and ups and downs, like really huge mood swings by the time. And I remember when I stopped sleeping was about 2006. And then they medically retired me in 2014. So there was huge amounts of sleep disturbance between there and there. And that's just non-sustainable.
And when a person is in that state of anxiety or trauma, unpacking or not unpacking, avoidance, whatever that is, they don't necessarily recognize it themselves, but those who love them do understand it, whether it be, myself with my father, whether it be, a friend, a family member, or a loved one, or a spouse. And it's hard to kind of make the connection of what's actually going on and then how to reach out to that person. Some of the things people are doing, there's a lot of different resources out there to kind of reach out to these people, but ultimately, in your experience, again, going back to, there's the physical medicine and then there's the emotional medicine, and there's tools in your tool belt. And and we'll talk a lot. This is going to be longer than one podcast. It's incredibly.
Yeah, no problem.
But what is one tool we decided to talk about today that I have personal experience with that has been incredibly effective for me, which is called EMDR. I was adopted, I might have some childhood issues on some level, and this and that. I had a lot of unpacking to do myself, for my different reasons. I've been through some adult trauma with some situations. And for me, the tool of EMDR was very effective. So trying to make this palpable to people, let's start with EMDR. So I love how you give your definition of EMDR, and tell us a little bit about the wolf.
Oh, well, hey, the wolf, I joined the army, and we started training warfighter stuff, and this is really high intensity. Shoot, the training was intense. By the time you got to combat, it's like generally you've seen some training that was much worse than what you're going to see in combat. And it was pretty intense. So you start to build this thing, Some people think of yin and yang, and it's kind of the darker side of your nature, but you got to find balance, because if you don't, it'll get really lopsided. When that lopsidedness happens, it makes a person sick. So, all they're thinking is, war fighting, preparing for war fighting, the next school, the next, the training cycle or whatever it is. And man, you need to find some balance, and that balance is with I found with prayer, meditation, and self-examination. Now Shannon was talking about EMDR, and I was exposed to EMDR, and what I learned is in journaling, writing my inventory, because I have a lot of thoughts, and a lot of them are horseshit. My brain is designed to think. My heart is designed to, beat and pump blood around. Well, my brain's off doing its own thing. It's not who I am. It has a lot of thoughts, and I have to filter through those thoughts. But as I filter through those thoughts, I'm writing. And what that does is, like, I have thoughts, and they get stuck up here in this part of your brain. And I need to get them over to this part of the brain, which is more of this is a parallel processor. This is a linear processor. This is very like who I am and what timeline things happen. This is like often moon dust and spiritual experiences and kind of mushy and weird. And I need to get those. If a thought gets stuck up there, I need to get them across my corpus callosum. And that's what EMDR does. It gets stuff to the right side of the brain for finding.
It helps you in the terms, as I've been experiencing EMDR therapy for I think the first time I did it, I went through a trauma, loss of several friends to cancer, breast cancer. My mother and two girlfriends, all in the span of about a year, in addition to a divorce, and then just going back through and unpacking my childhood trauma. Okay. So, but the point is, during EMDR, what it does in a nutshell is helps you, or in the journaling, the left to right, as you just described scientifically, helps you access so you can unpack and kind of manage and navigate what the feelings are brought up from that experience, which is not easy to do when you're suppressing it over the years and years and years. Is that a simplified version of what you were?
I like it. You got to just when those eyes are going back and forth across the page or across the screen or in front of a therapist, it's transmitting information back and forth across the brain, across the corpus callosum, and when it does that, the connectivity gets better and things are starting to get filed. They might pop out of the file again, but they're starting to get filed in the appropriate places inside this huge space known as my brain. And it's when they're just kind of, you got a messy table with all your notes around it. No wonder you're crazy, man. You got notes all over your table. You don't even know where today's homework is, because I got years and years of paperwork dumped on the table.
God bless you. So this, if anyone's listening to this and they're trying to figure out what is it where we're going with this, is that this is the beginning of a series of videos I want to do specific to my heart and my passion around helping people be comfortable in making palpable mental health therapy a little bit. It's been such a difficult thing for families, for loved ones, and for the person who has trauma, whatever that trauma looks like. And I'm not a licensed therapist. I don't have, neither are you, but boy, it's something to go through your own personal trauma and then find out what tools work and what tools don't. For me, EMDR, for example, is something that's been insanely effective. But you mentioned, I absolutely love how you just described all the papers on the table, because I tend to do that sometimes in work. I've got, stickies and Post-its, and, my brain is going all over the place because I'm a multitasker, and I focus on a lot of different things, and I've got them all organized, and in business, I can really file those things away, and I can proceed business-wise and navigate, shipping product and doing podcasts and lining up training classes and talking to, business partners. I can do all that, and I can organize it really easily because I'm not too emotionally worrying about each task. But when it comes to an emotional trauma or a wound, you're exposing a vulnerability about yourself that it's not so easy. Brian and I talking about, things people don't usually talk about, and they need to, I think, in today's landscape.
Yeah.
People are emotional. People are feeling lost. They're feeling a lot of feelings and a lot of stress and anxiety. And whether that be from what's going on in the world right now, or whether it be something you're harboring and carrying for years and years that you didn't even know about. A lot of that stuff's kind of coming out in today's landscape. And I feel like it's just it's so much to unpack and talk about. And literally, we could go on and on. So I want to go into a little bit more about how the transition for you from military to civilian, how unpacking that trauma, whatever your trauma was. I don't know, if it was childhood trauma, pre-military, or if it was the trauma throughout the work you've done. My God, you've seen some things.
I mean, it's a combination of everything. It's not just one thing. I mean, you're away from your family, you come home, your family doesn't know who you are, your kids don't know who you are, and then you go back over, and if you're not going back over, you're going to training, and then you got it's a constant pressure, it's a constant applied force. So then, all of a sudden, relationships with your spouse and your children is strained, on top of, the job being stressful and being gone a lot. And then the training to get ready for going overseas isn't gentle or nice. And then you get overseas, and then it's you're lulled into this state of boredom. And then all of a sudden, crap happens. and you're on the cleanup crew. You're the medic, or you're going up to the shock trauma platoon and see if they could use any help,
And as you come back over, the people that you come back to don't necessarily know all those details, and they're trying to connect with you. How was that experience coming back? Well, this last time I'm sure your experience the last year has been different. You've been through you've got all the tools now. So the tools you have now coming back versus the tools the first time you come back, what's the difference, and how are people relating better to you this time you're coming home versus when you didn't have the same tools? Does that make sense?
I always felt like I had a scowl on my face the first 2 years I got out of the Army,
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, I had a scowl on my face. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't smile about anything. And then I heard my children say it one day. My son's like, "Dad can't have fun anymore." And I'm like, oh shit, that hurt. And so I know, I was like, okay, my kids notice it. I might be oblivious to it, but we're going to have to do something different. Yeah. And
I can relate to that.
And then so slowly I got the tool sets. They're kind of piecemeal to you. You try one of them out or two of them out, and then all of a sudden you don't feel suicidal anymore. You don't feel like shooting your head off, and that was the biggest one. It's like, boom. I literally felt my brain change one day. It was like, boom. And, the suicidal ideations came to a halt. So there was something in what I was doing that was working, because I remember my brain wasn't like that before. I was, happy, joyous, and free generally as a kid. And then, somewhere along the way, something happened. And so I learned a behavior. I learned a thought process. I learned to be anxious. And so I had to unwind all that stuff. So I had to learn to do something different. Are you still there?
I'm still there. So
is that too personal? Maybe that's too personal. I should tell you about me wanting to blow my head off for years. Oh, okay. Well, that's part of the deal.
I had a lot of kind of abandonment issues because I was adopted and then put in an orphanage and then had to disconnect from the people that, you know, a little bit of my mom that adopted me. And then later on in life, you know, you don't notice you're changing your behavior to be, I was the daughter of a military guy. You know, my dad was full military. We had, you know, our house is surrounded book to book combat. I grew up with combat military, war, history, you know, very serious. And he was kind of like you said, the scowl, a little bit of the scowl on his face all the time. Like I'm in the army myself at the house. And I think I learned to be like, okay, just be perfect. You know, I'm a troop, you know, and it, because of that, trying to just, you know, you kind of lose your happy bunny spirit as a person in the household of someone going through that. And then I maybe changed my behaviors as I grew up because I'm trying to, you know, compensate for whatever feelings I'm having. But until you start acknowledging those things and and are willing to unpack them and be vulnerable within the space of those feelings, you can't start addressing how we're going to make them better. I think there's some interesting things going on in psychology right now as it relates to the topic of unpacking the information. And what I mean by that is being forgiving to yourself. So as you unpack those things that are happening, looking at it from a position of acceptance and grace, meaning you're not judging yourself, but you're exposing a vulnerability, but you're being curious about it and not judgmental about it. And I think what's happened in the world is this topic of, you know, labeling people with trauma or PTSD or, you know, childhood issues or whatever has caused people to close up a little bit, and there's judgment. And I think what I hope to do is be a contributor to unlock that judgment and let people be vulnerable and comfortable with it so we can talk about it and then figure out, you know, what medicine do you put on it? You know, is it medicine? I don't think so. I think it starts with, like, you know, mental health and communication a little bit. Well, I mean, depending on what's going on. But I mean, let's start with having the conversations and being open about our vulnerabilities. I have vulnerabilities, you have vulnerabilities, no one's perfect. And we're all kind of trying to figure out what to do and how to best navigate that yucky stuff.
Absolutely.
And there's no one out there that hasn't either had personal trauma themselves and or they've had a loved one with personal trauma, whether it be a child. Yeah. So today's goal is to break the ice and kind of open up a little bit that conversation with Red Frog and talk about unpacking trauma and then being curious about it. And, you know, we'll start kind of getting into a little bit of tools we can use to navigate those difficult conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you look at our whole society, especially after the last couple of years of this, whatever, COVID thing, whatever that thing is, you know, it is what it is. It is a virus, but all the shenanigans that go around it, there's going to be, you know, nothing's really like shine the light on this need. You know, all of us need this. Our society is still because of lack of it. It's really sad. Really, like this is a systemic issue we're dealing with here.
Yes.
And it's just not us. No. You know, the combat veterans. It's our whole society could use the tool sets here.
Yeah. Something important to me, again, back to my heart with Red Frog, is building a community.
Yes.
It's the community of military is obviously the soldier that goes off to fight the battle. And for every soldier, it feels as if there's 4 to 16 mini soldiers behind them, cheering them on and then welcoming them back when they get back. And there's a lot of trauma that goes on with not just the soldier, but also the military, you know, family support system or law enforcement.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Law enforcement has been on my heart deeply all year in the last couple of years.
Right.
Red Frog has attracted, anyone obviously in the military community, but also the law enforcement community. And I think what the trauma the law enforcement have experienced the last year particularly has been really hard, but their day-to-day combat on the streets, same thing. They come back, they probably have even, less time to process. They're
Yeah,
back
well, absolutely. Hours, minutes.
Yeah. And so anybody with that dynamic where you're dealing with a situation of a loved one in that high situation, high threat situation, or a loved one back home that has traumas going on with deaths or divorces and issues in the home, whoever you are, I just think that my heart is passionate about opening up this conversation and making Red Frog a place to be comfortable having that conversation. I think going out on the range has always been something that, more than just shooting, it's given people an opportunity to have that calm time for their brain. When you're focused and we're out there and the guys come out, or whomever's coming out for the day, everything stops and your brain gets to relax, and you're so hyper focused on the task at hand. And shooting is just that, so serious. The training is so serious that I think it really gives your mind and your body a break from whatever's been bothering you. So a little bit of a sense of therapy. And I noticed the camaraderie, again, trying to mirror what my dad was doing, going off and finding peace with his, the guy friends in that kind of space post-military was very helpful. And I think, if we can kind of open up that doorway and bring people into that conversation, whether it be on the range or in social media or in kind of lively conversations like this, the better. So we're gonna kind of, this was just a tickler of it, and we're gonna continue the conversation more. But I just wanted to
absolutely,
spark this off and welcome Brian back. Brian will be conducting not only the combat medicine classes coming up, but also some pistol, long range, and possibly a rifle.
All right, yeah, looking forward to it. Being up in Oregon, hanging out with y'all.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, thank you. This has been Red Frog Stop, Listen, Shoot. We're going into the mode of video and getting a little more personal and opening things up, which makes it all interesting. And welcome. I'm excited about this new direction, and I'm excited about Brian. Brian's been wonderful for the last year. It's been a crazy year for all of us, and we're finally opening the doors again and shaking off the dust and putting our, big people business clothes back on and getting back out there. So thank you, welcome, and we'll talk more soon.
All right, God bless you, kids.
Well, that was something. I don't know what. I definitely want to edit it.
It's all good. You know what? Good. There's a lot there, and then it's like you can kind of take it any way you want. Like I think through editing, you probably
ruin it. Yeah, I think that I didn't. I think I didn't know where we were going to go with that. We actually ended up getting. It's almost like we have to do it and commit to being personal, or what, you know what I mean? Like I think I kind of jumped into it. Like I thought we were going to go over more like, what it is, how it works, and who it affects. But really, ultimately, the conversation about that stuff has to start personal, or no one cares what we're saying.
Exactly. You personally shared hey man, this is what untreated shitness looks like. Shit show. You might want to do something about it because it affects all aspects of your life.
Yeah.
And then we'll build from there. I think though, being personal, it makes it like, oh, if you're vulnerable, then they can be vulnerable to listen. Then they're more likely to listen.
Yes.
They're like, and the nice thing from their point of view is they're not attached to the conversation. Yeah. They're just watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was good, guys.
I think it went good. Thank you. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Justin.
I think you actually crushed that. And better than you thought, Shannon.
Oh, I don't know. It felt I just want to
It
make
may
sure
have felt bad, but I think
it
you're
was
good.
okay. I'm just trying to open up an awkward conversation so we can dive in and start swimming around in it.
Yep,
But
that's absolutely.
because there's no right answer, but the problem is no one will have that awkward conversation, you know.
The only thing that I would want to say is like, maybe if I was to say any one thing, if I can navigate it, if I can come through it, anybody can. Because ego got in my way, like, yeah, old male patterning from, probably 3 or 4 generations or thousands of years, whatever it is. And if I made it through there, anybody can do it, man. We can do this shit.
Well, that's why I love talking to you, and I appreciate your take on everything, because you're able to do the science side of it, and then you're also able to make the palpable, connectable, easy to grasp concept side of it for us simple civilians. So I appreciate that.
You guys are awesome, man. I like hanging with you two.
Oh, Justin's ready to throw me off a cliff.
I was going to tell you, Shannon, my son graduates A school coming up at the end of November.
Yay!
And he gets to come home for Christmas for like 2 weeks, and then he goes back and goes to C school in San Diego. And then he gets his orders from there where he's going to end up. And then him and his girlfriend will probably get married at some point.
Everything's all planned out. He's
a planner, you know. He's
an
electrician.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. He got, you have to pick between fire control and something else when it comes to electrical stuff. And then he went with electrician full bore so he could get union certified. And he's in for 6 years. So when he gets out, he'll be able to go right to work if he wants.
Oh, good.
Oh, that's huge.
I don't know. He loves it, though. I don't know if he's going to get out. I think he might be a lifer. I don't know.
I hope you're filming this, Jeff, because I think this is cool content. That
I'm filming
over there.
Way cool.
Good stuff. I hope
we're proud of him. So the support and I love the military community, and I love how the hearts of the family's heart is there with with your family member. You're living it with them, and it's so beautiful.
It was cool to go visit him in Chicago. He's at Great Lakes, so we went and visited him a few weeks ago, and that was a good time. I'd never been to the Midwest really, so Chicago, and then we stayed in Kenosha, Wisconsin, right on the lake. Beautiful.
Nice. Yeah, it is. It's beautiful.
Nice country there. It's not bad. But good for my boy. I'm proud of him. So
yeah, I'm proud of him too.
Picture of it is wonderful.
That's always I liked about the military. I need structure in life.
I do too. Yeah. I liked our military. The good part about being in military families, when they say jump, you say how high, and that's the military is what's expected of you and what to do, and I love that about the military. Well,
all right, guys,
for sharing that. I love it.